Hello and welcome to my channel, Reading Little Blue Books Aloud. These are, as you can see by the top of the book, it says Little Blue Book. This one happens to be Little Blue Book number 813, and it's the one I will be reading today. It is entitled Contemporary American Philosophers. Now, when this says contemporary, this was written in the 1920s, so it's not contemporary 2000. It is contemporary 1920. The philosophers they'll be discussing is Santayana, James, and Dewey. And this Little Blue Book number 813 is written by Will Durant, PhD. Now, if you'd like to hear people read aloud, I read these cold. I love these little blue books. I collect them. And I read them cold, and I read them out loud. If you like it, subscribe and like my videos, follow along, and we shall begin. And this one was written, copyright 1925. Table of contents. Introduction. George Santayana. Biographical. Skepticism and animal faith. Reason in science. Reason in religion. Reason in society. Comments. William James. Personal. Pragmatism. Pluralism. Comments. And John Dewey. Education. Instrumentalism. Science and politics. And conclusion. And we'll begin with the introduction. There are, as everybody knows, two Americas, of which one is European. European America is chiefly the eastern states, where the older stocks look up respectfully to foreign aristocracies, and more recent immigrants look back with a certain nostalgia to the culture and traditions of their native lands. In this European America, there is an active conflict between the Anglo-Saxon soul, sober and genteel, and the restless and innovating spirit of the newer peoples. The English code of thought and manners must eventually succumb to the continental cultures and encompass and inundate it here. But for the present, that British mood dominates the literature, though no longer the morals, of the American East. Our standards of art and taste in the Atlantic States is English. Our literary heritage is English, and our philosophy, when we have time for any, is in the line of British thought. It is this New England that produced Washington and Irving and Emerson and even Poe. It is this New England that wrote the books of the first American philosopher, Jonathan Edwards. And it is this New England that captured and remade that strange exotic figure, America's latest thinker, George Santayana. For Santayana, of course, is an American philosopher only by grace of geography. He is a European who, having been born in Spain, was transported to America in his unknowing childhood, and who now, in his old age, returns to Europe as to a paradise for which his years with us were a probation. Santayana is steeped in the genteel tradition of the old America. The other America is American. It consists of those people, whether Yankees or Hoosiers or cowboys, whose roots are in this soil and not in Europe, whose manners, ideas, and ideals are a native formation, whose souls are touched neither with the gentility of the families that adorn Boston, or New York, or Philadelphia, or Richmond, nor with the volatile passions of the southern or eastern Europeans, men and women molded into physical ruggedness and mental directness and simplicity by their primitive environment and tasks. This is the America that produced Lincoln and Thoreau and Whitman and Mark Twain. It is also the America of horse sense, of practical men, of hard-headed businessmen. It is this America which so impressed itself upon Will, and it doesn't say, it just has a line, Will, of his own analysis of the two Americas. America is not simply a young country with an old mentality. It is a country with two mentalities. One, a survival of the beliefs and standards of the fathers, and other, an expression of the instincts, practices, and discoveries of the younger generations. In all the higher things of the mind, in religion, in literature, in the moral emotions, it is the hereditary spirit that prevails, so much so that Mr. Bernard Shaw finds that America is 100 years behind the times. The truth is that one half of the American mind has remained, I will not say high and dry, but slightly becalmed. It has floated gently in the backwater, while alongside an invention in industry and social organization, the other half of the mind was leaping down a sort of Niagara Rapids. This may be the found symbolized in American architecture. The American will inhibits the skyscraper. The American intellect inhibits the colonial mansion. Winds of Doctrine, New York, 1913, page 188. Liam James, that he becomes its exponent in philosophy, while his brother became more British than an Englishman, and it is this America that made John Dewey. We shall study Santayana first, despite chronology, because though he is the youngest of our greater philosophers, he represents an older and a foreign school, and the subtlety of his thought and the fragrance of his style are like the perfume that lingers in a room from which the flowers have been taken away. We shall have very probably no more Santayanas, for hereafter it is America, and not Europe, that will write America's philosophies. The author asks the reader's indulgence for the perhaps undue proportion of space allotted to Santayana in the present essay, on the ground that the philosophic thought of James and Dewey have received a wide and varied exposition, while that Santayana remains confined almost to an esoteric circle. The frequency of direct quotation is due to an unwillingness to substitute a mediocre phrase for the matchless language of Santayana. Contemporary American Philosophers, Santayana, James, and Dewey. 1. George Santayana. 1. Biographical. Santayana was born at Madrid in 1863. He was brought to America in 1872 and remained here until 1912. He took his degrees at Harvard, and taught there from his 27th to his 50th year. One of his students described him vividly. Those who remember him in the classroom will remember him as a spirit solemn, sweet, and withdrawn, whose Jonine face by a Renaissance painter held an abstract eye and a hieratic smile, half mischief, half content, whose rich voice flowed evenly in cadences smooth and balanced in a liturgy whose periods had the intricate perfection of a poem and the import of a prophecy, who spoke somehow from his hearers and not to them, stirring the depths of their natures and troubling their minds as an oracle might, to whom pertained mystery and reverence, so compact of remoteness and fascination was he, so moving and so unmoved. He was not quite content with the country of his choice. His soul softened with much learning and sensitive as a poet's soul must be, for he was poet first and philosopher afterward. Suffered from the noisy haste of American city life, instinctively he shrank back to Boston, as if to be as near to Europe as he could, and from Boston to Cambridge and Harvard, and a privacy that preferred Plato and Aristotle to James and Royce. He smiled with a little bitterness at the popularity of his colleagues and remained aloof from the crowd of the press. But he knew that he was fortunate to have found a home in the finest school of philosophy that any American university had ever known. It was a fresh morning in the life of reason, cloudy but brightening. His first essay in philosophy was The Sense of Beauty, 1896, which even the matter-of-fact Munsterberg rated as the best American contribution to ethics. 5 years later came a more fragmentary and more readable volume, Interpretations of Poetry and Religion. Then, for 7 years, like Jacob serving for his love, he worked silently, publishing only occasional verse. He was preparing his magnum opus, The Life of Reason. These 5 volumes, Reason and Common Sense, Reason in Society, Reason in Religion, Reason in Art, and Reason in Science, at once lifted Santayana to a fame whose quality fully atoned for what it lacked in spread. Here was the soul of a Spanish grandee grafted upon the stock of the gentle Emerson, a refined mixture of Mediterranean aristocracy with New England individualism, and, above all, a thoroughly emancipated soul, almost immune to the spirit of his age, speaking as if with the accent of some pagan scholar. Come from ancient Alexandria to view our little systems with unwondering and superior eye, and to dash our new old dreams with the calmest reasoning and the most perfect prose. Hardly since Plato had philosophy phrased itself so beautifully. Here were words full of a novel tang, phrases of delicate texture, perfumed with subtlety and barbed with satiric wit. The poet spoke in these luxuriant metaphors, the artist in these chiseled paragraphs. It was good to find a man who could feel at once the call of beauty and the lure of truth. After this effort, Santayana rested on his fame, contenting himself with poems and minor volumes. Then, strange to say, after he had left Harvard and gone to live in England, and the world presumed that he looked upon his work as finished, he published in 1923 a substantial volume on Skepticism and Animal Faith, with the blithe announcement that this was merely the introduction to a new system of philosophy to be called Realms of Being. It was exhilarating to see a man of 60 sailing forth on distant voyages anew, and producing a book as vigorous in thought and as polished in style as any that he had written. We must begin with the latest product, because it is, in truth, the open door to all of Santayana's thinking. Skepticism and Animal Faith. Here, says the preface, is one more system of philosophy. If the reader is tempted to smile, I can assure him that I smile with him. I am merely attempting to express for the reader the principles to which he appeals when he smiles. Santayana is modest enough, and this is strange in a philosopher, to believe that other systems than his own are possible. I do not ask anyone to think in my terms if he prefers others. Let him clean better, if he can, the windows of his soul, that the variety and beauty of the prospect may spread more brightly before him. In this last and introductory volume, he proposes to clear away, first of all, the epistological cobwebs that have enmeshed and arrested the growth of modern philosophy. Before he delineates the life of reason, he is willing to discuss, with all the technical paraphernalia dear to the professional epistemologist, the origin and validity and limits of human reason. He knows that the great snare of thought is the uncritical acceptance of traditional assumptions. Criticism surprises the soul in the arms of convention. He says unconventionally, he is willing to doubt almost everything. The world comes to us dripping with the qualities of the senses through which it has flowed, and the past comes down to us through a memory treacherously colored with desire. Only one thing seems certain to him, and that is the experience of the moment. This color, this form, this taste, this odor, this quality, these are the real world, and their perception constitutes the discovery of essence. Idealism is correct, but of no great consequence. It is true that we know the world only through our ideas, but since the world has behaved for some thousands of years substantially as if our combined sensations were true, we may accept this pragmatic sanction without worry for the future. Animal faith may be faith in a myth, but the myth is a good myth, since life is better than any syllogism, syllogism, I can't say it. The fallacy of Hume lay in supposing that by discovering the origin of ideas he has destroyed their validity. A natural child meant for him an illegitimate one. His philosophy had not yet reached the wisdom of the French lady who asked if all children were not natural. This effort to be skeptically strict in doubting the veracity of experience has been carried by the Germans to the point of a disease, like a madman forever washing his hands to clean away dirt that is not there. But even these philosophers, who look for the foundations of the universe in their own minds, do not live as if they really believed that things cease to exist when not perceived. We are not asked to abolish our conception of the natural world, nor even in our daily life to cease to believe in it. We are to be idealists only north-northwest, or transcendentally. When the wind is southerly, we are to remain realists. I should be ashamed to countenance opinions which, when not arguing, I did not believe. It would seem to me dishonest and cowardly to militate upon other colors than those under which I live. Therefore, no modern writer is altogether a philosopher in my eyes except Spinoza. I have frankly taken nature by the hand, accepting as a rule, in my farthest speculation, the animal faith I live by from day to day. And so Santayana is through with epistemology, and we breathe more easily as we pass on with him to that magnificent reconstruction of Plato and Aristotle, which he calls the life of reason. This epistemological introduction was apparently a necessary baptism for the new philosophy. It is a transitional concession. Philosophy still makes its bow in an epistemological dress, like the labor leaders who for a time wore silk breeches at the king's court. Some day, when the Middle Ages are really over, philosophy will come down from these clouds and deal with the affairs of men. And I think we'll stop there for now.